As a multi-ethnic and multi-religious country, Iran has maintained a relatively stable national unity. For example, the Kurdish problem has not menaced Iran's political integrity as seriously as it has in Turkey and Iraq, except in certain instances when the central authority was severely weakened. Despite their robust ethnic identity, many among Iran's Kurdish population have felt a sense of belonging to Iran. Such a strong cohesion may be attributed to the fact that, in spite of the changes in dynasties and regimes, Iran has maintained its geographical and political framework since the Safavid period, and in the process developed a mechanism to integrate different ethnic and religious groups into its ruling system. To verify this hypothesis, I will examine how the Safavid state tried to integrate the Kurdish tribes into its political system. This paper is a part of this research. In my opinion, under the Safavid rule, the Kurdish tribes underwent some significant changes. One of them was the rise of the Kurdish tribal elites in the Safavid politics. It is well known that the Safavid state was built with the support of Turkmen tribal tribes called Kizilbash. Although Iranian urban notables occupied administrative posts both in the central government and the provinces, it was the Kizilbash tribes that wielded real power in the political and military arenas. This does not mean that the Safavid Shahs excluded the Kurdish tribes from the Safavid government. The famous Persian chronicle Sharafname shows how the second Safavid ruler, Shah Tahmasp, endeavored to unite Kurdish tribes within the Safavid polity by various measures, such as enlisting members of their leading families in the Safavid royal guards, Kurds, and educating their children at the court with the Safavid princes. In so doing, he aimed to win the loyalty of the Kurdish chieftains. However, during the first half of the Safavid period, the monopoly of the political and military power that Kizilbash tribes enjoyed left the Kurdish tribes marginalized in the Safavid polity, as few Kurdish tribal leaders occupied important posts in the government. At the end of the 16th century, in order to curtail the excessive power of the dominant Turkmen tribal groups, Shah Abbas I began to introduce new elements such as Georgian and Armenian Gulams, who came to play a pivotal role in both the military and administrative spheres of the late Safavid state. Consequently, the post-Abbas Safavid state became more open and would eventually be composed of different ethnic elite groups. Such a transformation of the Safavid state inevitably affected the Kurdish tribes. Around the same time, some Kurdish tribal leaders were beginning to distinguish themselves in local politics as well as at the court. Specifically, beginning at the end of the 16th century, some of them were made governors in various provinces other than Kurdistan, especially in remote regions such as the Persian Gulf area and Horасан, while some others rose to important posts in the central administration. Considering that the Kurdish tribes had remained alienated from the Safavid political system in the period before Abbas I, these trends are remarkable. More interestingly, if we look at the background of these tribes, we find that they were transplanted from Kurdistan to Khorasan by the Safavid state in the 16th century. Thus, in this paper, focusing on these relocated Kurdish tribes, I will examine how they came to the fore in the Safavid politics. First, we must ask why and when they were relocated to Khorasan. This region constituted the border between the Safavids and the Uzbeks, and since the early Safavid period, the Uzbeks had invaded the Safavid territories across the border. Thus, to repel their attacks, the Safavid transplanted some Kurdish tribes to the region. We know that at least 3 Kurdish tribes were sent to Khorasan in this period: Siyah Mansur, Chegani, and Zangiane. The Siyah Mansur had originally lived in East Anatolia. It is unclear when they began to serve the Safavids. In 1552, Khalil Beg, Amir of the tribe, was promoted to the rank of Khan and appointed as commander-in-chief of Iran's Kurds, Amir al-Omaraye Jomle Akrad-e Iran, by Shah Tahmasp. The title of Khan was the highest of the Safavid military ranks, and in those days, only paramount Kizibashi Amirs held it. The post of commander-in-chief of Iran's Kurds was probably intended to control the Kurdish tribes by inspiring loyalty and Amir of the same ethnic origin. Khalil Khan was also ordered to patrol the trade route between Tabriz and Ghazvin, which was the most important route in Iran at the time. However, 2 years later, they themselves began to interfere with the traffic of the merchants, and Tahmasp dismissed Khalil Khan from the post of Amir al-Omara of Iran's Kurds, sending him to Khorasan instead. In fact, in 1564, when the Safavid governor of Herat, Ghaza Khan Tekkelu, revolted, Khalil Khan was mobilized to subdue the rebellion. As for the Chegani, we know that before the advent of the Safavid dynasty, the tribe had served the Akkoinlu. The period when they entered the service of the Safavids is unknown, but by 1528 they had clearly accepted Safavid suzerainty. However, according to Sharafname, after losing their Amir, they began to raid trade routes in Iraq and Azerbaijan. Receiving complaints from merchants, Shah Tahmasp ordered the looting and deportation of the tribe. While fleeing to India, about 500 members of the tribe reached only as far as Khorasan, where they became retainers of Kazakhan Tekkelu, governor of Herat. After he was deposed by order of Tahmasp in 1564, the Chegani left again for Garjestan. At that time, a member of the Chegani ruling family called Budak Beg was serving in the Safavid court as a royal guard, Kurds. Shah Tahmasp appointed him as the tribe's Amir and gave him lands around Khabushan. Thus, the Chegani became loyal defenders of the Safavid northeastern border. We find him among those who were mobilized for a defensive expedition against the Uzbeks during the reign of Muhammad Khudabande, the fourth Safavid king. We see below he played an important role during the reign of Shah Abbas. The Zangiane had originally lived in Iraq. According to Sharafname, serving with Shah Ismail I, they achieved an eminent rank, becoming an object of jealousy among their equals. But after losing their Amir, the Zangiane were divided, each faction entering into service with one of the Kizibashi Amirs in Khorasan and other provinces. As loyal subjects of the Safavids, they were seldom in contact with the Ottomans. In these respects, they were in strong contrast with other powerful Kurdish tribal confederations like the Mokri and the Ardalan. The latter tribes often resisted Safavid control, not recognizing Safavid sovereignty until around the middle of the 17th century. This is confirmed by the fact that Sharaf Khan Bidoli referred to all of these tribes as Iran's Kurds, Akrad-e Iran. He stated, the main Kurdish tribes of Iran, Akrad-e Iran, are divided into three classes or races: Siyak Mansur, Chegani, and Zangiani. A recognized oral tradition tells us that there were originally three brothers who came from Lorestan, or according to another version, the country of Guran and Ardalan, who left their homelands and homes with the intention of entering the service of the rulers of Iran. There is no confirmation that this legend is true. Maybe it's false, but it clearly suggests that these tribes were considered loyal to the Safavid state. So, what happened to the relocated Kurdish tribes? Firstly, they settled in the new lands and consolidated power there. The most interesting case is that of Budak Beg Chegani, who was appointed governor of Habushan. Soon after, he became one of the most powerful amirs of Horасан and aligned himself with other Kizibash amirs there. In the second year, appointed guardian of Prince Hassan Mirza, as well as governor of Mashhad. But the downfall of Moshed Ghori Khan Ostajalu, an ally of Budak Khan, put him in a difficult position. Carrying the prince, Budak Khan fled to Habushan and proclaimed himself the commander-in-chief of Khorasan. Finally, he was obliged to apologize to Shah Abbas, who dismissed him from the governorship of Mashhad, but allowed him to work in his service. Later, the Uzbeks took control of Khorasan, and in 1595, when the Safavids recovered Esfarain from the Uzbeks, Budak Khan was appointed governor of the region. Then, when the Safavids recovered Mashhad, he was reappointed governor. Thus, it is clear that Budak Khan was considered the key person in the defense of Khorasan. Initially, these relocated Kurdish leaders were given governorships in Khorasan. But later, some of them were appointed governors of other provinces. Ganji Ali Khan Zik is a Kesim tribe, accepted Safavid rule, and there is no reference to the tribe in the sources from the 16th century. So it seemed that the tribe was originally on the fringe. Ganji Ali Khan had served Abbas I since before his enthronement. After Abbas's enthronement, Ganji Ali Khan participated in campaigns and carried out many exploits. Thus, first he was given the governorship of Khaf in Khorasan. Then, by 1598, he had been installed as governor of Kerman, a strategic point in southeast Iran. Thus began his long rule of the region of Kerman until in 1621, when he was sent to Kandahar, newly recovered from the Mughals. He went on to rule this important frontier city until his death in 1624. It is the Zangir tribe that was given governorship in the Persian Gulf region. In 1601, when Allah Verdi Khan, a Georgian Ghulam and then governor of Fars, conquered the region of Lar in southern Iran, one of his subordinates, Gambar Khan Zangiani, was appointed governor of Dashtestan. Later, in 1631, Sabunduk Sultan Zangiani became governor of Bahrain. In 1675, Hossein Ali Khan assumed the post of governor of Kurdiya. In the last years of the Safavid period, Abdul-Baqi Khan became the governor of the same region. As mentioned above, initially the relocated Kurdish tribal leaders had been entrusted with the defense of Horасан, but later they assumed the guard of other peripheral regions, such as Kandahar and Kerman, as well as different regions along the Persian Gulf. This map shows the regions whose governorship were given to Kurdish tribal leader. They did not stand out only in terms of border defense. During this period, some of them distinguished themselves in the central administration. For example, the Zangane tribe. As mentioned earlier, the Zangane tribe was divided into several groups, and each of them served the Turkish Kızılbaşı armies. But during the 16th century, they were not so important as to appear in the historical sources. It is Ali Bali Beg Zangane who seized the chance to succeed in Safavid politics. He was selected as master of the royal stables, Amira Khurbashi, by Shah Abbas, and his descendants inherited the post. Among others, Sheikh Ali Khan Zangane, son of Ali Bali Beg, served as Shah Suleiman's Grand Vizier from 1669 to 1689, and made efforts to rebuild the Safavid state. Even after this, his family continued to produce leading figures in the Safavid politics until the end of the dynasty. It is also worth noting that the family was given the governorship of Kermanshah, a strategic point in the resistance against the Ottomans, and held on to it after the fall of the dynasty. Now let us compare these relocated Kurdish tribes with other Kurdish tribes who continue to rule the hereditary territories in Kurdistan, such as the Ardalan and the Mogri and other Kurdish tribes. Certainly, the Ardalan held a prestigious status at the Safavid court. They were one of the 4 local dynasties that were treated separately from other emirs. Young members of the Ardalan ruling family were educated at the Safavid court and enrolled as royal pages. But few members of the family were given a gubernatorial post in provinces other than Kurdistan. The contrast between the relocated Kurdish tribes and the others is striking. I'd like to conclude as follows. Roughly speaking, we can divide into 2 categories those Kurdish tribes who accepted Safavid rule. The powerful ones, such as the Ardalan and the Mogri, were not always loyal to their sovereign, and to keep their independence, they sometimes revolted against Safavid until the mid-17th century. The more loyal tribes were called Iran's Kurds, Akrad-e Iran. These minor tribes accepted Safavid's suzerainty without resistance and became the Safavid's faithful servants. Having no hereditary land to defend at all costs, they were easily transplanted to Khorasan. The radical reforms undertaken by Abbas I provided the transferred Kurdish rulers with a chance to rise in Safavid politics. Some of them were appointed governors in Khorasan, as well as in other border regions such as Kerman and the Persian Gulf. Some others built successful careers in the central administration. These developments had important implications for Iran's history. As I said earlier, during its 2 centuries of existence, the Safavid state gradually transformed itself from a Turkmen state to a multi-ethnic state. Although prejudice against the Kurdish tribes lingered among the Safavid ruling elites, the participation of the Kurds in the central and the local administration brought about a common understanding that even those of Kurdish origin could assume power in Iran's politics. During the civil wars following the collapse of the Safavid state, the successive warlords such as Nader Shah Afshar, Karim Khan Zand, and Agha Muhammad Khan Qajar considered the Kurdish tribes as their important partners, and the Kurdish tribes considered themselves as a part of Iran. In this way, we can say that Akrad-e Iran, Iran's Kurds played a role of breakthrough in Iran's transformation to a multi-ethnic country. Thank you for your attention.
A factor in all these, picture. I mean to say that Safavids were Shia.
Yes, I know.
And what about the Kurds?
In my opinion, the religious factor was not so important for the Safavid policy toward Kurdistan. If you read Sharafname, you can understand well that Shah accepted any Kurdish Amir when he saw allegiance to him, regardless of religion, Shia or Sunni.
So it didn't matter.
No, it depends. Of course, for example, in the last years of the Safavid state, Shah Sultan Hussein was very religious man. So at the time, ulama was so powerful at the court. So the Safavids tried to exclude the Ardalan family from the post of governor, and they sent Shia governor in the Ardalan. But the population was not the population were dissatisfied with this policy, and they went to the court, and finally Shah Sultan Hussein sent Ardalan, a member of the Ardalan family again.
So it was of minor importance. Yes, certainly it can be acknowledged. Thank you very much.
State, and it was organized after the collapse of the Karakoyunlu and Akkoyunlu states. And how can you see this situation? You are talking about the Iranian loyalty, but it was the territory not organized because it lost its sovereignty, and it was a new organization of the territory. It was just starting from the not from Iranian origin, but from the just maybe 0 point. So maybe we can say talk about the just not Kurdish but themselves, but they started to find the way how to organize this territory in new way, in using finding new loyalty, not just Iranian, not just talking about that Iran, just big territory, always organized, and because at that time this part of the Iran which was adjacent to Caspian Sea, it was just big Kurdish province, and it's very difficult to say it's Akkoyunlu Turkmen or maybe it's Kurdish in its origin, because it's the question who is the Kurds and who is the Turkmens. It's maybe the same name of the same meaning of the name, because they started from the Horасан territory and the Central Asia part of that region. And so, why you are talking about this loyalty to Iranian idea? Maybe it was just finding something, because Iranian is nothing, because you can about Persian, Luristan, other parts you may call them in their local names, not like Iran.
But I think the Safavid state, Safavid dynasty, try to legitimate the rule as iranskим, I think. So the concept of Iran began to become important in this period. So, and
yes, I see, I understand it. Thank you.
May I ask you once more question? Another question. I'm interested in the Baluchi tribes. Have you come across anything about the Baluchi emigration from the presumably the Caspian Sea region to the present-day location of Baluchis? Has it happened before the time you were just studying, or probably before that? Yes, but probably you have some knowledge of it.
I'm sorry, I don't have any knowledge on this subject, but maybe if you...
And what's about Baluchi Kurdish ties and their similarity, or probably some kind of kinship between them? Is it not?
I think it is very difficult to find information about this problem in the source in the sources.
Some present-day Baluchis, they consider themselves to be twin brothers of the Kurds. Therefore, I'm asking about this.